Hi, this is Coach Judith, and I am glad to welcome you back to Quarantine Coding Club. As we have done in the past, we will be reviewing a video that my coworker Stephen created, and I will be stopping throughout to discuss it with you. This one is fairly sophisticated, so I'm going to try to describe some of the terms that he uses so that we can make it a little easier for perhaps some younger audiences to watch. A little bit about me for those of you who haven't seen prior videos. I am an employee at MetaCoders and I've been teaching coding to children for many years, about 6 years, and usually in the classroom prior to our stay at home orders due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I've also worked in industry and I'm really enjoying watching these videos with you and letting you know some of my thoughts about them and also learning. I'm learning a lot from watching Stephen create these videos, a little peek into his brain. So let's get started and let's watch.
This morning, even though it was raining, I put on gloves and put up flyers. I'll keep.
Oh, so I want to tell you, for those of you who haven't seen these episodes before, the reason Stephen is putting up flyers, he is trying to help the world, his little neighborhood in San Diego, one little neighborhood at a time, by creating a community online through Facebook. And he has decided to do that by creating flyers with QR codes that people scan that take them to a Facebook group where they can talk about what's going on in their little neighborhood. And he's hoping that that might help and trying to ask for ideas for other people to see what you can do to help in your neighborhood. So that's what he's about to do here.
Doing this over the course of the week and wait for my group to grow. If it does, I'll ideate on how to enhance the value.
I want to define that word ideate. He has used it in prior videos. It is a fancy word that means basically to think. So have some ideas and think about them.
And if not, well, at least it was a quick experiment. This episode has 5 parts. If I had to name them, I'd pick Palace, Amphitheater, Garden, Library, and Denouement.
For those of you who have seen these videos in the past, you will see that they usually have 5 minutes, 1 minute on each topic. In this case, the 5 minutes are going to be palace, library, garden, amphitheater, and then this funny word denouement, which is a very fancy word, I'm assuming from the French, which means epilogue, which is just the ending of a story. And so Stephen likes to put in these little jokes to make sure that we catch them. Maybe not everybody does, but here he's saying, why didn't you just say epilogue instead of that fancy name denouement?
We are here looking at a floor plan of a magic palace. It looks small on paper, but the real palace, if it existed, would be huge. This room is an amphitheater with a spot for a stage and 4 sections of seating for the audience to sit in. The library is a giant room that has only 1 book, but the book contains 5 chapters that describe every story ever written. The garden has a pathway with a shape you may recognize from a previous episode.
So I wanted to just let's look at these 5 sections. I wish I could. So this is not a real palace. This is a magic palace. But these are some things that maybe in the real world, before we were all stuck at home, maybe you have seen some of these. So a magic palace, there are actual palaces. I have personally been to some palaces when I've traveled to England and Ireland. Wondering how many of you have been to an actual palace. An amphitheater, that is a kind of a big word, but basically a place where people perform. I bet some of you watching have been on the stage as a performer, and maybe you've also been in the audience watching a performance, something that none of us are allowed to do right now in either case, being as a performer or as in the audience, which is a shame as we're all stuck at home, but we can remember what it was like. The library, that is one of my favorite places to go. I love to go to the library and check out books and check out movies and just be there in a nice, quiet space to be able to think and get some work done. All of the libraries here where I am in San Diego are closed, although you can still check out books onto computers and tablets and phones and that kind of thing, virtual books. And then the garden. So, one of the good things that I think a lot of people are doing for their mental and physical health, if you have a backyard or a space that you're allowed to go to where you can still stay separated, socially distant from other people, you can still go garden. And I'm really glad to be able to go out in my backyard and garden. So, these are just some of the rooms that we used to be able to go to in real life, and now we're just looking at them virtually.
Episode. It is the shape of a dilemma. We'll spend 1 minute in each room meditating on something that many cognitive scientists call extended mind.
Extended mind and cognitive scientists. Those are two words that Stephen just used. So we'll start with a cognitive scientist. It is a person who studies thinking or the process of thinking and thoughts. It is a fancy word for that. And the extended mind theory is something I will confess, I looked up before I started recording this video. So the extended mind theory is the idea that your mind doesn't just live in your brain, but instead you can extend it to physical things in the world, like maybe a piece of paper and a pen where you write down some of your thoughts. That could extend your mind so that your thoughts are recorded on this paper, and maybe they don't have to be in your brain anymore, but you have extended your thoughts elsewhere. If you've written down your words, maybe in a story, or you have created a piece of art, or you've written some music, that is all extending your mind to other things. And that's the extended mind theory.
If I were giving a speech about...
Oh, did you catch? We've now switched to minute number 2, which is the amphitheater minute.
Extended mind, I might turn to the first section of the audience and say, for those of you who are students, if you don't know about your extended mind, you will remain trapped in your regular one forever.
Oh no. So Stephen has taken his audience and split it into 4 different quadrants there. And he's saying to students, if you don't know about the extended mind, but luckily you guys do now, then you will never be able to escape what's just right in here. You'll have just whatever is stored there and nothing else, and no way to increase it. And that would be a shame. I also want to point out this right here. This is a chess piece that keeps showing up in Stephen's videos. One of the reasons is Stephen does like to play chess, but also a lot of computer scientists play chess. It seems to be a common hobby among computer scientists. I wonder how many of you guys play chess. Let's look at these other 3 quadrants.
Ever. I might turn to the next section and say, teachers, if you aren't teaching your students about their extended minds, you are making your job harder and theirs.
Why do you think your job would be harder as a teacher if you don't teach students how to use their extended mind? That is an interesting point that Stephen is making, that in order to teach new things to students, they need to be able to do something with all the facts that are already stuffed in their brains. And it's important for teachers to understand about this extended mind theory.
Then I would turn and say, artists, whether you know it or not, you know how to extend your mind. Please teach the engineers on your right.
So he's saying that artists, even if they don't necessarily know about this extended mind theory, they are using the extended mind theory because they are creating things that will last outside of their physical brains, whether it's paintings or music or writing a novel. All of those things are extensions of an artist's mind, whether they know the theory of extended mind or not. The other thing that I want to point out here, here's another one of these little Stephen jokes where he talks about the engineers on the right. So these are, this is the right-hand side of the audience, is the engineers. But for anybody who has never performed in a play. When you're in a play, you are on the stage, and let's say I am in a play and you are my audience, this is my right hand, but stage right is from the perspective of the audience, from you. So you need to actually turn around, and stage right is actually now my left hand, because what you're seeing on the right is different than what is my actual right. So that's a cute little Stephen joke. Let's keep watching what he's advising engineers.
Finally, I'd say, engineers, whether you know it or not, you know how to extend your mind. Please teach the artists on your left.
Oh, so I really liked that. So whether the engineers understand the extended mind theory or not, they are also creating extensions of their mind. What are some of the things that engineers might be creating outside of their physical brain? Computer scientists might be creating software. Other engineers might be creating physical products, like you might have an engineer that designs a car, or an engineer that designs the computer or phone that you're watching this video on right now, the physical thing that they've created, or just the software that they've created that operates that. So any project that you see might be created by an engineer who has extended his or her mind. We are now going to go to the third minute of the 5-minute video.
Teach the artists on your left. If we open the...
So this next minute is the library minute.
one book, we see that it is a story about stories.
Okay, so Stephen just said this book, the one book in our little magic library, it contains a story about stories. And then what he's written down here, I'm not sure if you can see it because of my blue line in the way, but it says meta story book. So it is a meta story. I work for a company called Meta Coders. And what meta coding is we write code, software, computer science code, that creates code to teach students how to code. So we are meta coders. In the case of this library that has one book, the one book is a story about stories, which makes it a meta story. Let's see what this story about stories is.
Chapters 2, 3, and 4 are called beginnings, middles, and ends. They are surrounded by additional chapters, prologues, and epilogues.
Okay, so this is the traditional plot of a book. You might have a little pre-discussion of what you're about to read, the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, the end of the story, and then the discussion at the end. If you are watching or reading a book that has a chronological story, that might be exactly how a book is written. Not every book is this way, but this meta story book is a book about stories that all fit into this nice little 5 segment.
Does this structure really describe all stories? Probably not.
What are some stories that do not fit this very simple 5 segment visual here? I have read books that jump around in time, and I have read books that don't have an actual plot. Maybe they just have different discussion points. So not every story has this exact format, but I'm wondering, what stories have you read that don't?
But then again, let's put it to the test. Once upon a time, I was just a normal coder. But then I journeyed to a scholarly realm known as graduate school.
So this story that Stephen is telling us is his autobiography. It's the story of his life.
And learned that some believe that the mind extends beyond the brain.
So Stephen went off to graduate school, and he was taught about the extended mind theory, which we have discussed. I want to point out this people here, that's the people in grad school, and he writes the word weird, and then he puts this double equal sign. So this is a computer science term. You might have seen just a regular equal sign. This is more of a comparison of the things on the left and the things on the right.
I spent many years actively rejecting this idea. My mind is inside me. My mind is me. But then one day I wrote on paper, why do I want to believe that so badly?
So Stephen went off to graduate school, learned about extended mind, but he didn't want to believe in the extended mind theory because it is kind of a weird theory, and so he rejected it. But then, as we're sort of heading towards the end of the story, not the end of Stephen's life, but just this portion of his life, um, he started to write things down. And I think this is going to be a kind of a transition point because, as we have discussed, the extended mind theory does heavily draw on the idea that you get to write down your thoughts. And so here he is writing down why so many no's.
And by writing this down, I realized I had freed a tiny bit of space in my mind.
Oh, that's an interesting point. He writes down his thoughts, and now he has space in his mind so he can do something else with that little piece of his brain.
Into that open space popped a second thought, which I also wrote down. Shouldn't I be striving not to need paper? Shouldn't I be striving not to write? I wrote. Isn't my brain a muscle? I wrote. And isn't writing a crutch? I wrote.
So here's some of Stephen's thoughts. Isn't my brain just a regular muscle, and our writings, is that sort of cheating when you write down your thoughts? But I'm going to guess that the answer is going to be no, that isn't kind of cheating. That's actually really helpful because you can take these thoughts and put them away for a long time. Maybe you forgot about them and then you come back to them years later and your thoughts are still there, this extension of your mind.
I was transported to the garden.
Oh, wait, we didn't really do much of the epilogue. Did I skip it?
Writing a crutch, I wrote. I was transported.
Oh, okay. Well, that is the end of the third minute, which was of the 5-minute video. So we are going to conclude this video here, and there will be a second video where we go over the next few minutes of Stephen's video about the extended mind. Thanks for joining.